So I'm going to kind of just, before jumping into a trial here, talk about sort of where spinal cord stimulation came from and where it's kind of heading, or it's already there. The spinal cord stimulation sort of technology is, developed in almost 1965, using the gate control theory from Wall and Melzack. At the time, they felt like doing dorsal stimulation would provide relief for, really small indications, low back pain, post-laminectomy syndrome, failed back surgery syndrome. And the original tonic stimulation, was done around 40 to 80 hertz, provided good relief for radicular pain. The studies showed that it did work well. But these are also patients who have axial back pain, whether it's, post-surgical majority of the time, or just, a back that was refractory to other treatments. The tonic stimulation didn't work as well in the studies for axial back pain, and patients didn't do so well. So after this tonic stimulation, several years later, high frequency, came about, doing a stimulation at 10,000 hertz instead of 40 to 80. And that introduced a whole nother sort of concept. There was a Senza trial at the time, where now we were getting coverage based on these high frequency models. We were able to be paresthesia free as well, covering both back and leg pain. So it kept adapting to people's pain patterns. The tonic stimulation was all paresthesia based, patients feeling stimulation in the areas where their pain was. And again, most of that was leg symptoms. So then fast forward, you get to the high frequency models and the high frequency stimulation. Patients again did well, but still there were some gaps in sort of the pain areas that were being treated. So then you get burst stimulation and then combo or dual therapies as well. And that's a lot of what we're doing now, is we're mixing and matching different technologies and different features of stimulation. You can have a patient who actually enjoys the paresthesias, where they're having pain. Some people just want to feel nothing. There's also expanses in how patients move, and their leads can migrate. Patients can feel pain when they cough or lean forward. So again, this is going from paresthesia-based to high-frequency, paresthesia-free, and then we move on to burst stimulation, and now, newer technology is closed-loop technology. And closed-loop technology measures ECAPs. It's almost like using like a smartphone, and it recognizes to change the stimulation based on those ECAPs. And that is sort of the direction. I mean, if you look at sort of the world in general, everything is moving more towards automation, and closed-loop was sort of that next level. But again, some people still do better with different technologies, mixing and matching the technologies. You may get patients that come in with back pain and leg pain, some with only foot pain for neuropathy, which is a newer indication. But we're still treating all those symptoms, and even getting even more as pinpoint into dorsal root ganglion stimulation now, treating knee pain, post-knee replacements, hip pain, CRPS. These are all sort of newer indications that spinal cord stimulation is picking up along the way. So you take a technology from 1965 based on the theory, and now we're in, fast forward to 2026, and we've had, several companies, several different technologies. Each of them have their own way of doing things, and providing pain relief to the patients. So that's just kind of the background. On my table here, I have a couple leads too. So all of them have the technology here. So this is the Boston Scientific leads here. Again, 16 contacts, which is what we use. The implants will be 8 contacts, but again, there's a variety there. Then we have the Medtronic leads here, a little bit more wider spaced. To toggle over here. There we go. To the other side. There you go. Here we are. So again, different leads. Different providers will have their preference in terms of what they feel steers better, what gives patients the best response to their therapy. And then here's the Saluda leads, which are the ones that we use the ECAPs and closed loop simulation for. Again, we get a good sort of gist of the variety that's out there. And again, there's other companies out there too. But the trial and the technique that we're using to implant these leads and trial the leads is similar across the board. But again, not every patient is the same. We know that they have different pain generators, and what you're targeting or what you're using spinal cord stimulation really picks up on patient selection, right? If you're just implanting or trialing every single patient that comes to your office, your success rate or your trial to implant ratio is going to really be low. But if you're picking these patients properly and you feel like they're going to benefit, you can use sort of any of these therapies. And likelihood is that from your comfort zone that they will benefit from the procedure. So I'm going to kind of go on the model here. We have X-ray set on the AP view. So the goal with this, some people will go in at L1-2. Let's go north a little bit. Yeah, where's that? That's good. So some people will go in at L1-2, some people will go in at T12L1. You can look at the spaces and see which one benefits. This one's a little bit hard to see the ribs, so we're calling picture. We're going to call this guy T12 because we do see a rib kind of coming off the side there. And then our entry point, what I usually do is T12L1, which is picture. Essentially right here, picture. Yeah. And so when you start, because you need to stay posterior, you don't want to start and go up and down with the needle. So you want to start a level or a level and a half below. So I'll start here around L2, picture, right around here. Way I learned and what, the way some people learn is you can put a lead on both sides. You can do both on one side. I usually do my trials both on one side. We'll ask the patient, what side do you sleep on? What side would you want the battery on so it doesn't interfere? Some people say left, some people say right. And hopefully that whatever side they want the battery hanging off on or the wires hanging off on, then we will do the trial from that side. So I'd essentially numb up the skin here. I'd start here just medial to the pedicle. Picture. And so we're sort of flattening out the needle here, kind of like that. That way, again, we want to stay as posterior as we can. If we start going anterior, then the trial sort of gets more complicated and more challenging. So I'll kind of drive. And again, the needle has a marker which tells you which direction it's going to go. I'll show you on here. So there's a little notch. Let me see it there. That's going to give you the directionality. So if that notch is facing down, it's going to go more anterior. If the notch is facing upwards, it's going to stay posterior. So initially, I'll dive going downwards, and then I'll turn this around to stay posterior once I feel like I'm getting closer to the epidural space. So here, I'm kind of just driving the needle, picture. Driving down, picture. And then just kind of making moves. Picture. So we're heading towards the space there. Picture. Picture. I'm getting closer. And sometimes you can hit lamina once you're first starting out and then guide it into the space. Some people, get more experience and they will just kind of know exactly where the lamina is. So I feel like I got some give there into the ligamentum flavum. So we'll take the stylet out, do loss of resistance here. See the loss there. And now I want you to really hone in on my angle off the midline here, as well as how flat that needle is. Again, if we're more up and down, that ends up being a problem where the lead will kind of dive on us. So then also the lead has a little turn to it. So that'll give you some directionality and steerability. So as I'm putting this in here, picture. So you can see how it's already turning. So we have a little steering wheel at the end of this, picture. And so I will kind of guide this, picture. And we'll go up, picture. Picture. Keep going up, picture. Picture. A little bone there, picture. And so this will ride up to T7. For most patients, we can do a trial at T7, 8, 9. Will follow me north. Picture there. Picture. Picture. Let's go live for a second here. And so you can see this, the lead turning. You may hit some bony landmarks there. And then we go up still. All right, we'll just call this. Obviously, we'd count, but we'll call this, let's say, T7, right? Pretty high there. But essentially, you could see the trial lead here covers 3 vertebral bodies. When you have that kind of capability, you can kind of capture back pain, leg pain. We'll start a trial at T7, T8, T9. But now if someone comes in and they have simply just leg pain or foot pain, we may be lower on our trial. And you get patients that come in all the time that say, I have no back pain at all. It's all in my legs or my hips. You may drop the leads to like a T8, 9, 10 trial or a 9, 10, 11 trial. When you do DRG, you'll go into the foramen correlating to the nerve you're trying to stimulate. So you'll be at, you could be at L4 for the knee. So there's all these different varieties when you have spinal cord stimulation, different varieties of needles as well. So once we have this lead in place, we would put a second lead as well. And I'll just show you kind of what each of these looks on X-ray here. And then again, we do the same technique. I'm not going to place the second lead here. And then once the wires and leads are hooked up to the battery, you can have the rep stimulate for exactly where they want the pain, where's coverage, is it left, is it right. I do all my trials with the patient with conscious sedation at the max. Some people will do local only. You really want to know that you're in the right spot. With the variety of anatomy that's out there, scoliosis patients, you want to make sure that you're capturing exactly where their pain is. Same thing with implants. You may do not a conscious sedation, but a MAC case, but you want to make sure that the patient can respond during testing, just to make sure again that they're capturing where they're feeling their pain. There are some providers who do the implants with the patient completely under. You may have to reprogram them or hope that they get the coverage that they had during the trial. But those are the sort of caveats here. Once you've done a trial, 5 to 7 days, I use oral antibiotics after. You'll have the patient. So that's where the second part of patient selection is, okay, we've done a trial, everything went well, they had great pain relief. Now you decide where are we now? Can the patient charge? You have a rechargeable and a non-rechargeable. Obviously you could see the non-rechargeable is a little bit bigger, but let's say a patient has rotator cuff issues, frozen shoulder, a little bit older. You may say, well, they may not be able to charge at all if they have no help. So you may decide that this battery, even though it's bigger, is more beneficial for them. People who don't have shoulder restrictions or are able to charge the battery, you may say, let's go with the rechargeable battery. And those are things that come into planning after you do a trial. A trial, you can see, is pretty easy. Just a needle poke, and that's how we kind of tell the patients, hey, it's like an epidural injection, but we're not putting medication in. But during the implant, you have to plan, okay, I'm going to make an incision on the middle, incision for the battery, and then, we're left with which one do you prefer? Some people just want the ease, and they'll say, hey, it's okay if it only lasts 5 years or 6 years, but I don't want to have to charge this every day or every week. So they'll decide one way or the other. And that's sort of the gist, of spinal cord stimulation, at least on the trial side. Biggest take-home points is, we came from paresthesia stimulation and have kind of worked our way up to paresthesia-free, almost into smart technology now with, ECAPs and closed-loop technology. Direction is obviously still going, still being made, Bluetooth technology. I've seen, phones and different type of remotes out there that have sort of developed along the way. But the biggest thing here is patient selection. And I think, all the other faculty and other docs in the room will agree. If you pick a technology of any procedure, whether it's spinal cord stimulation or SI joint fusion or spinal simplicity, you have to make sure that you're selecting the right patients that'll benefit from the procedure.
That's great. So just quick question.
Yep.
So high frequency, low frequency, different number of contacts, different systems, rechargeable, non-rechargeable. Let's just take a garden variety patient with back pain, a non-surgical, non-operated low back pain. How do you decide which system to use?
Right. So that's again, I think if it's just axial back pain, I will put spinal cord stimulation towards the lower portion of my toolbox, if you want to call it. If we've done facet mediated procedures, if we've done RFA, we've done BVNA, if it's indicated, the selection is basically the one that gives me the most options. So I'll pick a system that I can have paresthesia stimulation or I can have paresthesia free, high frequency, and most of it has gone away from that tonic stimulation. So when I can get a system that kind of blends and mixes all of them, that's the one I'm going to choose for that patient specifically. Because it could be right now that they have axial back pain, down the line you've implanted this patient and they start having radicular symptoms or neuropathy. So you want to have that option of let me make sure I can cover everything.
Good approach. Minimally invasive, fix-it shop approach. Questions, comments, Dr. Gandhi?
So my question's about for the implants, if you've ever had to use general anesthesia, and I guess for any of the faculty, and if so, have you used neuromonitoring and how you use it, whether it's SSCPs or just EMG evoked potentials?
So yeah, so on my implants, I usually do MAC cases for these patients. I do trial them when they're on the implant as well. So I don't use general, and I don't do neuromonitoring at all. I think if they are under general, then it makes sense to do the neuromonitoring. But I know it's a wide range, actually. Some people do, some people don't. But in my case, I use usually MAC anesthesia just so I can test the implant as well.
I use MAC for trialing, and I use general for permanent implants, no neuromonitoring.
Yeah, it seems the neuromonitoring recommendations have been extrapolated from spine surgery literature, and they don't really, to me, make sense for how that would either help efficacy or safety for an implant.
Yeah, so I think if you have to use neuromonitoring for a permanent spinal cord stimulation implant, you probably should drop the instruments back slowly away from the table and send that patient somewhere else. I mean, the rate of safety to say it's high is not true. It's extremely high, and I think neuromonitoring is way overdone.
I guess the question just comes from the NAC guidelines a couple of years ago.
Yeah. No, I agree with that point. Questions, comments? Okay, we are going to transition over to a break right now. I would encourage you bio break and